Hey, what's up, you reunifiers? We're back. We're after a week hiatus here. I apologize for that. Kind of went on a bender there, and I blame the warden, Scott Ward, for holding me hostage there on the golf course last week. So I wasn't able to get a video out, but we're back nonetheless. We did miss a week, but week 9 coming up. But first off, I did want to give a shout out to Dan Reddick there for getting his first win last week against me. He called it. But Dan finally got that elusive first win of the season, and we'll dive into week 9 here in just a minute and talk about his second win back to back. So stay with us. All right, we are back better than ever, live here with the Mish. After week 9 here, we're going to do a quick rundown of the scores from this past week. We had the Warden facing Johnson. The Warden pulls out the win 139-87. We'll dive into these numbers here in just a minute as always. But moving on to the next game real quick, we had Big Fish getting his second win of the season, 143 over the Gorton Fishermen 77. Tough week for Logan there. Beats by Ray 101 to Coffee Creamers 146. So Braden staying hot. Caddy Waddy 123 to TOB's 118 in a close game. TOB takes her third consecutive loss. Watson's Bath and Spa 111 to Short Bus Drivers 189. Just put up huge numbers this week. And then we had Don losing to myself, the Motorboaters. I had 166 to Don's 122. So here in just a minute we're going to dive into these numbers, but first and foremost, let's kind of do a quick recap of the division standings here. Starting off with the Noob division, TOB, she still maintains a game and a half lead over the second place in her division, so she's still in first place at 5-3. Second place is still the Gorton Fishermen. No changes in this division at all whatsoever, seemingly ever, but Gorton stays in second place at 3-4-1. Caddy Waddy at 2-5-1 in third, and Dan creeping closer at 2-6, trying to get out of that cellar. So hope he's able to do so. And then moving on to somewhere in the middle division, we have Watson's Bath and Spa holding on to that top spot at 6-2. Beats by Ray at 4-4. So Drew's got a 2-game lead there. And then Don in third place at 3-5, and Team Johnson also at 3-5 in fourth place. And they're in the Vets division. This is getting interesting, people. We had Short Bus Driver at 6-2 with Coffee Creamer also at 6-2. Myself, the Motorboaters at 4-4, and the Warden at 3-5. So simply put, the whole league is now separated by 4 games. So after 8 weeks, we are all separated by 4 games. That, it looks like we're going to have a tight race to the finish here to kind of divvy out these six playoff spots. But one interesting thing to note when I looked at the overall scoring, the top 4 scorers in our league all come from the Vets division. So kudos to your Mish for the placement and how we divvied up these divisions. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there. We're going to dive into these games next. All right, so again, very, very tight races going on here. So we're going to kind of look into these week 8 games and do a little breakdown here. Again, starting off with the Warden. 139 winner over Team Johnson's 87. So we only had 2 teams score under 100 this past week. So really a kind of high scoring week for everybody. And that started with the Warden's 139. So unfortunately Team Johnson just couldn't get on board this past week. As I look at his numbers, he only had 17 combined points from his running backs, 25 combined from 3 receivers, 2 at that tight end who beat me the week before he only got 2 points with. And he only had 1 double-digit scorer on his bench, so really not much Mark could do in the way of making this a close game. Scott was just kind of rolling. Again, we talked about this in past videos that the Warden, he's hard to beat. If you're going to beat him, you're going to have to score 120 plus, and that kind of held true this past week. So as we looked over at Scott's score, 34 from A.J. Brown, who I believe has been, since week 2, maybe the number 3 fantasy scorer in all of fantasy, and that's behind 2 quarterbacks. And I'm not sure if those numbers translate to our league scoring, but when you watch ESPN, I did catch that statistic last week. So, and he continues to rock and roll. Joe Burrow getting back on what we're used to expecting from him with 28. And Scott had 6 double-digit scores in this game. So, when you hear Mark struggling to score points and Scott's pretty much throwing double digits at everybody who's playing you, it's going to be tough to win if you can't score with him shot for shot. So, and then to make matters worse, Scott even had solid bench depth. So Scott just had scoring all up and down the scoreboard this past week, and was able to kind of set that lineup right and get 139 and kind of an easy walk into a victory. So again, he kind of, my whole division, myself and Scott, Jason and Braden, we all won this week. So no ground gain, no ground loss. But when you're in a tough division like that, you just need to keep checking off the wins and kind of hope that the division will come back to you. Again, we have 6 playoff spots, and could our division send 3 or 4? It's very possible. So just a big hats off to Scott and the Warden and Team Johnson. Back to the drawing board. I know he's struggling with Davante Adams. Maybe this move of them firing their head coach and general manager yesterday might kind of play into his favor. And I know they're also moving on from Jimmy G finally. That just hasn't been an experiment that's worked in their favor at all. It's been spotty at best. So they're going to look for kind of a young and unproven guy to take over the reins there. And I know Mark's hoping to get something out of Davante Adams because, not going to lie, I know he was hoping he'd get traded, and that just didn't happen. So better luck next week, and here we'll move on to the next game. All right, next game, Team Big Fish, big winner, 2 in a row, 143 winner over the Gorton Fishermen 77. So congrats, Dano, tip of the cap to you. I know it was a long time coming, and I didn't get to shout out to you last week. I just didn't get that video out, but I wasn't gonna miss the opportunity. Regardless if you won or lost this week, I was gonna do a little throwback to last week and kind of give you congratulations. But hey, we get to congratulate you on 2 in a row, and not only did you win 2 in a row, but you did it in style. You scored 143. I know those numbers you've been looking for all year. It's just kind of been elusive for you. You had 4 guys score 20 plus. That's off to a great start right there. The Vikings, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on with the Vikings when we get to my game. But they did have Kirk Cousins for most of that game, and you chose to roll out two Vikings position players, and T.J. Hawkinson and I believe K.J. Osborne, and that netted you 37 points just between those two right there. Jalen Hurts, 26. He's the number 1 quarterback in fantasy football, and he's been your saving grace all year, and you're finally getting some depth behind him to start putting really good numbers together, and obviously it's 2 wins in a row, and you keep scoring like that, and you might just keep checking them off, and who knows, that division's kind of getting tighter and tighter as TLB continues to lose. So it's all within grasp. We still got, I think, 6 weeks left, so it's still anybody's game here. As far as Gordon goes, Logan, this is about as bad as it was all year for Logan. He only had 3 people in double digits. Only got 5 out of Patrick Mahomes, who's actually slipped down to 5th place among quarterbacks in fantasy scoring. And then when I looked over his bench, it was just a plethora of zeros and just no help. So, Logan's going to look to rebound this week. He's still got Logan really is reliant on that starting roster, and that he doesn't have much depth, but it's proven to put up a lot of points throughout the season, and hope he's going to be able to get back to it this week and on. So we'll see what happens. I know he struggles with Alexander Madison, and the lack of a third real deep receiving threat. So, we'll see how he orchestrates his lineup moving forward, but 77 last week's pretty disappointing, but not the bottom of the barrel. We still have, I believe, Team Johnson or Team Don to thank for that low score of the year. So that was that sucky award. I think it was you, Mark. Anyway, hats off to you, Dano. Great win. All right, moving on to the next game. It was Team Coffee Creamers 146 over Beats by Raves 101. Quick question, Tim. I noticed you got rid of your logo. Just kind of curious what happened there, just to get some copyright infringement. I enjoyed it. Anyway, just curious. But as we look over this game, first thing I want to point out is Braden. He scores weekly, and I mean, as we talk about this with Scott, Braden may have the best starting lineup in the league, I think. And the way Tyreek Hill is just automatic. He's seeming to find consistency in that quarterback position, which is his only weakness. But the trades that he's made with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's scored more in the last 2 weeks than he has in the previous 5 at all, and then with Alvin Kamara and him scoring 29 points. So just to touch on Kamara, he's moved into the top 10 among running backs, and keep in mind this guy was suspended for 4 games, so that just kind of shows you he was out as many games as he's played, and he's still able to kind of creep the top 10. So that's a great move there, and it's a formidable lineup, and it's going to take a lot to beat him. So, Tyreek, again, he had 27, 222 on the year. He's the number 2 overall fantasy scorer, which was almost surprising to me, to be honest with you, because I actually thought he'd be number 1, but it's Christian McCaffrey, believe it or not. And then when I looked at Braden's bench, he was full scorers there, low scorer on a bench of 5, and I think he only had 2 players that were in single digits on the bench. So he's scoring in bunches, and he's scoring all up and down his lineup and bench. So at this point, it doesn't look like there's a move he can make wrong. Just hopefully he avoids the injury bug, because it's coming, and it's every one of us at different times, and myself this week. So, but great job for Braden. He's been stringing together a lot of good games. I think he has the longest win streak in the league right now at 3 games. And then when we look over at Beats by Ray, he only had 1 guy over 20, 5 people in the single digits. He had a 28 and a 25 on his bench. I believe one of those was a tight end. So, could he? It was a great tight end pickup. He's got 2 good tight ends. Could he be the first guy all year to play 2 tight ends in a single week? It's going to be interesting to see. Not a great week for Tim, but I do feel like he's still got the guys in the roster to be able to put 120 plus on any given week. So he's not an easy win ever. Just kind of caught that luck. It happens to us all, where we just have those weeks where we can barely squeak 100, if that. So it was just a tough week, him facing Braden, and Braden's been on fire. So great win, Braden. And we'll see you back at it next week, Tim. All right, moving on to Caddy Waddy versus TOB committee. Caddy Waddy pulls that off 123 to 118 over Vanessa. First, we'll touch on Caddy Waddy's success before we talk about TLB's failures, because they are coming mightily right now. Caddy Waddy only had 2 single-digit scores, so that's always a plus. When you're talking about defenses and kickers, and that's a positive when you're only getting 2 guys scoring in single digits. I mean, sometimes it's hard to find guys scoring double digits. So good job there. Jamar Chase seems to be back, like we talked about Joe Burrow in a previous game breakdown, and the Cincinnati offense and just Cincinnati as a team seems to be kind of clicking. They seem to be kind of getting back to what everybody expected them to be from the start of the season. It's just kind of taking a little bit to get there. But Jamar Chase, 27 points. He's moved up into the number 4 position among receivers from fantasy scoring. So when you see some of those early numbers that he put up, for the fact of him to be at 4 at this point is kind of remarkable, honestly. And this game, real quick, Isaac had no help from his bench, by the way. So his bench is pretty suspect at best. But he won this game on Monday night, and I can tell you for a fact, because I didn't get to watch much of the Monday night game. We were kind of out doing some things, but on the way home, I did kick on the game on my phone, and Josh Jacobs won that game in 1 possession, 1 drive. He scored 13 points. When you're talking about a 5-point win, that's what you look at. And he did it all, and it was just 1 drive where they just rode his back all the way down the field and let him punch it into the end zone to kind of get that 6-point cap. So, he did what he needed to do. And then as we look over at Vanessa and the struggles that she's had, she's lost 3 in a row now. For the last team to lose a game at all, to lose 3 in a row has got to be a little bit disheartening. I still feel like she's got the roster to get it back. If we look back at the Diggs trade, would that have helped her? Absolutely not. She's still winning that trade 100%. Just to put it in perspective, JT scored 12. I got Diggs 16 this past week. So JT's 12, Olave's 9, and Cole Kmet had, I believe, 17. So she's still winning that trade. She just can't figure out how to play him yet. She did get 27 out of Prescott and 14 out of that Dallas defense, who's helter-skelter. Sometimes they're banging, for almost 20 points a game, and then there's times where they don't get anything. I guess it just depends week to week what they're going to do, but that's what it is when you talk about defenses. She only had 2 people in single digits, so she scored. She just didn't quite have enough. She had 2 from her tight end, and she's been holding on to this Jonnu Smith like this guy is some godsend to the tight end position. I don't understand it. I just don't get it. I've tried to talk some sense into her. She doesn't listen to me. It's just like life. She just doesn't listen to me. She's got 17 points from a guy I traded to her. I tried to explain that this is the guy you want. You are playing a number 2 tight end on his own team over a number 1 tight end. But, live and learn. And then I still, when we look at the JT and the fact that she's got JT and Zach Moss, when I talk about JT, I'm talking about Jonathan Taylor. Does she get to a point where she plays them both together? And I don't envision that being an option too much longer. But gosh, when Moss put up 15 and JT put up 12, I feel like these could be some times where you're missing some opportunities to maybe capitalize on both on the usage of both of these players. So I do feel confident she's going to get it together. I'm not sure who she plays this week, but I know she's looking hard at that roster this week, trying to fine-tune some things to get that win, and good luck to Vanessa. So big win for Caddy, kind of coming a game closer. I think you were the only team or you and Dan, the bottom 2 teams, and the only 2 teams to win in that division, so that cuts the whole game off her lead right there. So you're making up ground. That's all you can ask for at this point. All right, moving on here, the biggest game of the week, or highest scoring affair of the week, was Short Bus Drivers 189, which was amazing. 2 points off our top score of the year, set earlier in the season by Logan. What was amazing about Jason's 189, real quick, he's a 189 winner over Watson's 111. Sorry about that. But as we look at Jason's numbers, the Short Bus Driver had a 0 in his lineup this week and still posted a 189. So that just goes to show you how deep his roster can be when they're all clicking. And he does rely a lot on this Jahmyr Gibbs. So we'll see how that continues to shake out in Detroit, whether or not he's going to be the bell cow moving forward, or they're going to kind of bring back David Montgomery. It's anybody's guess there. But he had 3 players over 30 points, 2 more over 20. So just, incredible numbers for Jason. He's got some bye weeks coming up, so we'll see how he progresses moving forward. But just a huge win. For Watson's, a little bit disappointing. He caught the injury bug this week. It happens to us. He did have 29 from Allen, 23 from Barkley, so his big 2 are what they expect to be. But Jacoby Myers, who Drew's fell in love with, I'd have a hard time loving anybody on that Raiders team, but Drew loves Jacoby Myers. He got 1 point. Do you blame that? Some of the videos I've seen of Jimmy Garoppolo missing wide open receivers, I'm not really going to put too much stock in the fact that he had a bad game as much as the quarterback had a bad game. But he only got 1 point out of his tight end, Darren Waller, who had been kind of rocking and rolling lately. But he got injured in that game. I don't think it's going to be too severe. It's a hamstring injury, so we'll see moving forward. But the big blow up of 34 or 39 points from DeAndre Hopkins on his bench. I know he's a little upset that he didn't play him, but it does make him feel a little bit better to understand that, if he had played him, it still would have been a loss when you're playing somebody who puts up 189 points. So it was not Drew's best week. I feel like he's going to be right back to, kind of checking some wins off here. It did knock him from the top spot of the league. I think it knocked him from first to maybe second or third. I haven't looked at the overall standings at this point as far as playoff standings. I believe he's going to be in second, which is still a bye. 1 and 2 get a bye as we go into the playoffs, so just keeping that in mind. But just a disappointing loss, but a huge win for Jason. So when you're playing up against a guy who scores 189 points, you pretty much know you're beat. So just take it, move on to the next week, and kind of hope the injuries don't last. So hats off, Jason. Nice win. All right, last game of the week. Myself, the Motorboater, second highest score of the week against Don. Myself, 166 over Don's 122. It was a interesting game to me, just personally. It was the top 2 running backs in the draft this year going head to head. And while Christian McCaffrey's 31 points did outdo Austin Eckler, I believe he had 23, 25, somewhere in there. CMC did get the better of me on that. My drafting proved better. My team is deeper. And it was another interesting matchup in that game was one of Donnie's heavy hitters and receivers, Gabe Davis, who's hit and miss, going up against Stephon Diggs. They play for the same team, playing against each other this week in fantasy. And Gabe Davis actually got the better of Stephon Diggs by 7 points. But, Donnie just didn't have enough. He only had a 12-point game out of Lamar Jackson. And then the continued disappointment of Kyle Pitts. He's been in double digits 2 games all year. I would be beyond frightened. I wouldn't draft him for that very reason. You just can't trust him in that Atlanta offense. So Donnie's just, back to the drawing board. I'm not sure what to tell you there, buddy. But myself, this was I felt like it was my most consistent output of the year. I just had a single-digit defense, and that was it. Everybody else was double digits. 4 guys over 20. A solid bench. I mean, you look up and down that scoreboard. My bench guys were scoring. Everybody was scoring. There wasn't a move I could make wrong in that game, to be honest with you. But the big hurt was I lost Kirk Cousins in that game for the year. That's going to be tough for me to rebound from. I do got Jared Goff. It just kind of unlucky for me. It happens to be the week I lose Kirk Cousins is the week Jared Goff's on a bye. I don't know if he's going to be able to put up the same amount of numbers that Cousins can. I do trust that offense can do it. I just think they like to trust in that running game a little bit more than the Vikings do. So I'm a little worried there, but it does, it has kind of forced me to the waiver wire to add a new quarterback for this week coming up. So proud of the win. We lost two in a row for the first time all year. So it was a nice little bounce back win, and always a nice win whenever I can knock Donnie back down to where he needs to be. So in the bottom of his division. So anyway, that's the week this week, guys. I know it's kind of I get to going on these games, and it's probably hard to keep up, but it's just the numbers the way I see it. We'll try to get next week. Good luck to everybody this week, and that's it. We'll see you guys. Mish out.